Canudi, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call.
Edward Canudi. Here. Renee James.
Here.
Julius Wiggum.
Here.
Sheriff Bruce. Frederick McCoy.
Here.
Marie Davis.
Present.
Present.
Thank you. Do we have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Good evening. Jeff Gagnon, Planning Zoning Administrator. I did want to inform the board that I did receive a phone call from Ms. Brooks. She had a family emergency about 20 minutes prior to the meeting, so she obviously won't be able to make it tonight, so that's why she's absent. For additions and deletions to the agenda, I'd like to make the suggestion to put new business before the unfinished business and hear the site plan before we discuss reasonable accommodation language. Additionally, in the agenda packets that are in front of you, there is two revisions to the packet itself. There'll be track changes, there'll be circular or otherwise. That pertains to the October 11th, 2012 minutes. Actually, that may not have the strike through in it, but there were some grammatical mistakes that were corrected. And also there'll be the strike through underlined copies for the reasonable accommodation language. So just to inform you that there was some minor amendments to that prior to tonight's meeting.
Thank you. You all have received your minutes, comments, observations. Mr. Canudi?
Move to approve the September 13th minutes.
Second.
All in favor? Did you have a comment, Mr. Wiggum? Oh. All in favor? I guess you need to poll the board.
Edward Canudi.
Yes.
Renee James.
Yes.
Julius Wiggum.
Yeah.
Frederick McCoy.
Yes.
Marie Davis.
Yes.
Unanimous voting. Minutes approved.
New business?
I guess we're also looking for a motion to approve the October 11th, 2012 minutes.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Unanimous?
Unanimous.
Okay. It's unanimous approval.
Do we need to poll the board? I forgot. Do we need to poll the board each time? Or say
Because
aye?
That was meeting minutes. It seemed like it was unanimous. It was unanimous last time, so
Okay.
if it wasn't a hot topic item, typically doing a roll call would be better, but it's more customary item. Just a yea or nay is acceptable.
All right.
So as chairperson, you know, make that decision.
Thank you. All right, we'll start with new business.
Excuse me, I have to put this presentation on there. In the meantime, I'll do a minor intermission, I guess, just to give you guys a status update on meeting recordings and putting them online. I was able to go through our IT department and we were able to figure out a way to post the recordings on YouTube. So now on our website you'll have both the written meeting minutes and you'll also have the recording available online. So if you want to access the verbatim recording, you can do so whenever you want. But it's all public information. You can send that link to other residents that are interested in the meeting recording. So hopefully that simplifies that process.
So that's just audio.
It's just audio.
All right, good evening, Brad Stein, Visual Planner with the city. We're here tonight for an application for an amendment to an already planned, already approved PUD that was originally approved by resolution 16205 on September 21st and by resolution 12906 on September 6, 2006
One more time. One more time for me.
for the resolutions.
Yeah.
They're in the staff report, it's on background, and they're resolution 162-05 and resolution 129-06. And representing the applicant tonight, we have Brian Chegas here with Cutler and Herring, and if you have any questions for him when I'm done, he's here able to answer any questions. So we're going to go through this real quick, and we'll go through the site plan, the location, adjacent properties, and the staff analysis. The property is located north of Blue Heron off of Military Trail between Military and 95. This is the property right here that we're talking about. It was formerly known as Woods Edge and now known as Mediterranean. The property to the north, the northwestern section of the corner is Golf Center USA, and the property immediately to the north is adjacent, similar uses, a large rental community, and then some large multi-family development right off of Leo Lane. The property to the east, I didn't take a glorious photo of 95. I think we all pretty much know what 95 looks like, so I just used the aerial photo. And actually, when I went on site today, I could only really access the site to about here because it's all pretty much fenced off and everything, so access was limited for me to be able to get back there and take a photo of that. Properties to the west are the development Woodbine, and to the north of that is the Woodbine Commons, which is a commercial property, which is to the northwest, across the street. And the property to the south is a drainage canal and an unincorporated mobile home park. The proposed development that the applicant is currently requesting is really similar in nature to what was there. Basically what they're requesting for the amendment is approximately 70 more units, which is still within up to 15 units per acre. It's approximately 14.9 units per acre. And on its site itself is 69.25 acres. And it'll be portioned out by these pods, A, B, C, and D, and ideally to develop them and as-need basis to come in and start building those as luxury apartments in the 1, 2, and 3 bedroom type development. And this rendering right here is just a picture of the actual master plan portion of it with the pods themselves. And it kind of shows you a little bit of the, you can see the roadway going all the way around, and then some of the amenities, or the locations of some of the some of these amenities, like this portion right here, is already currently existing and was built for the original Mediterranean. This one shows it a little better. This is the site plan rendering showing the layout that is proposed for the apartments. Is the step analysis, the proposed use again, the applicant is requesting an amendment that will modify the residential building and unit types that were previously approved as fee simple townhomes to low-rise luxury apartments that will incorporate 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units in a variety of building types. And in total be 1,038 total units with a density of approximately 14.9 units per acre. With the 98 existing townhomes constructed in the northwest corner. And so there'll be 30 additional townhomes and then the proposed 910 apartments. Per the zoning regulations, the proposal complies with our current city's land development code with the impervious ratios and per the RPUD zoning district. As far as the comprehensive plan, again, it's in compliance. It meets the up to 15 units per acre density per the medium density of the land use of our comprehensive plan. Level of service, all level services are provided to that area. There will be water and sewer connections that are easily accessible for city services. Landscaping, the proposed landscaping is basically the existing plan with any modifications that come in will be for each pod. We will be reviewing them separately and make sure they're in compliance. And as far as for parking and traffic, there will be the minimum requirement of 2 parking spaces per unit, plus an additional parking spaces for the square footages of the amenities, and approximately about 50 guest spaces. Okay, and then for traffic concurrency, they're working with Palm Beach County to get a traffic signal and DOT at that location, which would be able to service that facility a little better than just having the way it's set up with a turn in and a center lane right now. With the amendment, staff recommends the approval for the Mediterranean RPUD development for the changing from fee simple townhomes to low-rise luxury apartments. Again, like I said, if you have any questions, the applicant representative Brian Chekas is here from Cutler and Herring. And I opened up any comments for the board.
Mr. Canuti, comments?
Yeah, excuse me. I have a couple of questions for the applicant.
For the record, Brian Chekas from Cutler and Herring.
You mentioned that there are going to be luxury rental apartments.
Yes, sir.
What kind of price range is a luxury rental apartment?
Board member, that's probably real early for us to be able to give you a number now because the retooling of the master plan doesn't look that far ahead. The individual builders that come in and develop a pod or 2 or 3 pods will set those prices based on the numbers of 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units that they develop within those pods. So this retooling doesn't, we wouldn't know that. It would be up to the individual builders who come in and do the actual site plan approval and ultimate development.
So what you're saying is nobody did a pro forma to see whether this is going to make any money or not?
No, not at all. It's not that. The reality is that this developer is taking over the project to be able to retool it in a way that it can have the flexibility required to meet the market demands. There's no dumbing down of the units. There's no Section 8 housing. This is geared in the same vein and spirit that the original development was in. Instead of townhouse configuration, it's apartment flats, and that's what the market can sustain. That seems to be a very big product right now in South Florida, is accommodating apartment dwelling.
Are you going to, is the plan to build out the complete project? A, B, C, D, E, F, G? Because staff just mentioned A, B, C, and D.
No, I think what Mr. Stein was getting at was that, and I'm just going to put an image up for you real fast here. I think what Mr. Stein was alluding to was that what this plan now does is the flexibility is there to do up to 10 pods. 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever can be developed. Whoever has interest in it, the whole thing is intended to be built out. But there is flexibility if someone wants to buy 5 pods or 2 pods. That flexibility is there. It provides for variety. But ultimately, the whole project is intended to be built out. And this flexibility will allow for that versus trying to do the whole development in one shot, which obviously, in good times or bad times, that's a very big project or a big sort of bite to take off at one time. This is much more, controlled approach and a more systematic approach to reaching that finish line.
So you're going to have multiple developers building this out?
Potentially. If someone comes in, if one big home builder comes in and wants to develop the pods and bring in their various products, absolutely. If they only want half, then it could be 2 different developers. We see that as providing excellent variety within this overall development. Each pod stands very much autonomous. So unlike the previous approval, where driveways and communities kind of bled across that loop road, which is really more of a loop driveway, this concept pulls in the idea of autonomy for each of the pods, and you get that variety with unit types, building types, siting, and that now becomes a true boulevard loop road that feeds all of these various individual pods.
So conceivably, every pod could have a different builder and look different.
Conceivably, but I'll tell you that the new owners, BTI partners, their intent is to try and get one significant, well-known home builder, or try and get that home builder who has a variety of products to come in and take it over.
You're going to build out 30 of the townhouses that replicate what's there now?
That is a possibility. 30 of the units have yet to be built in that shaded area in the northwest corner of the development adjacent to Military Trail. There is the option of keeping them there. There's the option of putting them onto a pod. That flexibility, again, may see a second pod with the remainder of the townhouse units if someone's interested in that market. But those, and if that's the case, that area would remain green or be developed to the benefit of the folks in that existing community.
It seems to me that we're being asked to approve a project that we really can't get our hands around.
Okay, that's simple. Okay, this isn't your 1-acre site plan. This is a PUD. PUDs are commonly mixed use, and currently in our PUD code, they can be mixed use. They can be for a portion of commercial, a portion of residential, and this is exactly what you would want as a type of mixed use. It doesn't necessarily need to be the same cookie cutter 1,000 units that are exactly the same.
That's not what I'm questioning.
Okay.
We're given approval for 910 units plus 30 townhouses. We have no idea what they're going to look like. Are we going to see a site plan for each pod as they come online?
No, it'll be a staff level review for each section and each pod.
So we're not going to see anything here once we approve this.
Right, that's correct. But currently, it could be that way right now. It could be that way right now.
Well, if I remember correctly, Mediterranean, there was a site plan that was approved.
Right.
There was a site plan that showed renderings, showed elevations, and we had a pretty good picture of what that project was going to look like before we approved it. I think right now we're saying, trust us, that these are going to look good. And we don't even know who the developer is, okay? All we know is that the property has an owner.
Or remember, the reality is updating the master plan is the first step to be able to implement the ultimate site plan solutions. Staff has that standard by which all of the site plan pods that have to be site planned individually would have to meet. So parking, height restrictions, architectural, that's all at a staff level review. The overall PUD or the overall intent for the development isn't being recreated. All we're doing is modifying it to work to be able to get it under development. So I think Mr. Stein did a great job with his presentation. What you're seeing as the upgrades is very similar to what was approved before in terms of the shape of the road, the lake, the open space. We have more now, but ultimately staff has that ability to implement each of the individual site plans just based on their code for site plan approval.
Well, you say there's not much of a change, but there's a significant change, 910 rental units. One of the problems that this city has had for a very long time are rental units. And we made a push a long time ago to get fee simple developments. Okay, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but at least we had an owner, and with the idea that somebody who owns it's going to take care of it as opposed to a rental community. So it is a fairly significant change going from where we are and to where we're going with rental units versus fee simple. The second change is we as a board really don't have any idea what this is going to look like. Okay, I mean, and I guess you guys don't even have an idea what it's going to look like.
At this point, that flexibility built into it will be managed by staff as individual pods get developed, and that's the kind of flexibility that's needed in today's market to be able to get this project to start coming to fruition. Because as it stands now, we've got a very large 62.5 acres that can't be done at one time in the configuration it's in now. The market doesn't support it, and by retooling it and maintaining that luxury apartment demeanor, that's what's going to ensure that you're not going to have a rundown development 20 years from now. That developer or those developers will be responsible for their pods. That will all be part and parcel of whoever's managing their assets. And that's why BTI's vision is to hopefully get to one or two large builders to be able to do it comprehensively. So for example, if you have a Centex or a Lennar, you know what you're buying into, for example.
Well, you mentioned luxury apartments, okay, with a trailer park on one side and Section 8 housing on the other side, or some Section 8 housing on the other side, okay, across from a apartment project that's very middle of the road, okay. I mean, the logic fails me, right? That I'm going to pay top dollar and walk out and stare at a trailer park. And there's nothing wrong with a trailer park, but they all have their places. But this place is right next to my luxury apartment.
And this is a gated community. There is a guardhouse and a gate in front. So as soon as you get past the front door and you get into the ring road and you get into the pods themselves will have their own ways of access. This will stand, and when you drive along this property today, the landscaping along Military Trail is significant. That's only going to get better when each of the pods, when Pod A, for example, develops and they do their landscape buffering internal. This will stand on its own. It backs up to 995. We do have a trailer park to the south of us. Will it be there forever? Maybe not. It is a co-op, so it'll probably be there for a long time. But the development across the road, Woodbine, again, middle of the road, but a newer development. So there has been activity in this area. I believe that with BTI working with the right developers, staff will be able to readily analyze any of the site plans that come in, and it'll have to meet their satisfaction. And that was why staff, as part of just updating the master plan, the bubble diagram. Master plans are bubble diagrams. It's had to be included to show that this analysis was done for 2- and 3-story type buildings, how they would lay out generally, and that comfort level to them was we're not flying blind. When a site plan comes in, it'll look very close to this. We can park this site. We can get dumpsters out there. They see that. That's the comfort level that staff has so when pod A, B, C, D, or all of them come in, they understand and they have this advanced look. Our specific architecture, can't tell you, can't show you. It depends on who ends up being the ultimate donor.
Question for staff. Can we require with this PUD that each approval site, each site plan come before this board?
I'm not really sure. I think it would probably follow whatever our land development code regulations follow for site plan amendments.
Well, land development code calls for this board to review site plans.
Right, but if this is an amendment to that, it's typically an administrative process.
I understand, but we're changing the site plan. So, in effect,
right,
the site plan that was approved is no more. Correct?
I think we're more or less changing the use category from fee simple to rental units.
Well, you're also changing the site plan. What I'm saying is, when we look at this project in the end, okay, it's not going to look like the original Mediterranean site plan. And I understand that, and that's fine, okay? I'm just trying to preserve the right of this board to approve, have the right to review the site plan for each, and whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 10 different site plans that wind up coming in.
I would say on a normal parcel, that'd probably be the correct procedure, but this is being approved as an RPUD, which has it as one large parcel. There can be separate uses and separate parcels, separate pods, so I'm not sure about that.
Well, let me word it another way, okay? When we approve a PUD, we approve a site plan.
Right, and there is...
Okay, so now you're asking us to change this site plan, to change this PUD, which is okay, However, it also negates the site plan. So the site plan that was approved by this board originally is no more. All I'm saying to you is what I would like to see is as those site plans come through staff, this board has the right to review them and sign off on them.
Well, at least we should have the right.
Well, I think we can require that as a part of this change. We could say, we just don't want to fly in the dark. I mean, we don't know what they're going to look like. We don't know who the builders are going to be. I mean, once we give this approval, I mean, they could do an awful lot on that piece of property that we may or may not like, and maybe better than we like. So, I mean, all we're doing as the primary planning arm of the city of Riviera Beach is reserving the right to review the site plans and approve them as they come.
To recommend approval?
Well, that's all we do is recommend approval to city council, yes. I mean, it's a normal process.
I don't know. We'd have to look into it, I guess, to tell you the truth. I just don't know that answer right now off the top of my head. I apologize. We'll get that information for you for sure.
One last comment on recommendations. Number 2, should we have some kind of a target completion date as opposed to just a 18-month start date? I know that's a little harder number to get your arms around, but we've got a number of projects that started, okay, with push and shovel, and now sit.
That's some regulation that we could compare to see what other cities and municipalities are currently doing with that.
Yeah, no other questions at this time.
Ms. James?
This question is for staff. Do we have any other developments within the city that have this type of concept where you may have multiple builders come in and build out different parts of the development?
Not currently in the city. The city is almost 90% built out. This is one of the largest parcels that's actually left in the city for this type of development. I have seen in the past where home builders have worked together, like Coulter and KB Home will have one large project and they'll build one section, and Coulter will build one section and KB Home will build one section. It's definitely not something that's uncommon, but in the city, no, there's currently nothing like this.
So this will be the first one. And the only other question, this whole development will be considered as Riviera Beach.
Yes, absolutely. This is definitely Riviera.
What is going to be the zip code for that area?
I think it's 33418.
33418?
No.
Sound right? I believe, I'm not sure then.
Okay, because
I can pull up the Palm Beach County map.
yeah, I would just want to make sure if we're approving something for Riviera Beach and this whole entire development is going to be in Riviera Beach, then it does need to state that, because there are some residents who kind of live out in this area who kind of think they're Palm Beach Gardens, and we've kind of been seeing that when people come in for their driver's license, where they're trying to like round the border, but want to use Palm Beach Gardens because that city sounds better than Riviera Beach. So that is a concern of mine. So just to make sure, I mean, if this development is in Riviera Beach, that it has the Riviera Beach zip code.
Well, Riviera Beach has 5 zip codes.
Okay, well, as long as it's aligned.
I think one thing that addresses that, even though there's been a long-going, I guess I'll say, discussion with the Postal Service as far as the actual zip codes of the city, and I know that I believe Councilwoman Judy Davis was working with them in order to come up with a uniform zip code for the city. We do have in existence advertising ordinance, which requires any businesses that if you're located inside the city, doesn't matter what your zip code actually is, if you're located in the city limits, you have to state, if you're listing a city or a location, you have to state that you're in the city of Riviera Beach. So being that these would be rental units, if they were advertising the rental of these units, it would have to be described as in Riviera Beach.
I'm just saying, I have seen that with some area residents out in this area, in this particular section, that want to claim Palm Beach Gardens when Palm Beach Gardens is not really the city. So I'm just putting it out there that if this is Riviera Beach, then you stated that. And out of the 1 to 5 codes, that's Riviera Beach. I never knew we had 5. But I'm just putting that out there. That's all my comments.
Mr. McCoy?
Yes. Curious, and speaking of that, the co-op, which I believe is Palm Lake Co-op, is that actually in the city of Riviera Beach, or is that unincorporated?
Yes, that's correct. It's unincorporated.
Okay. And the, I guess, what is it, 30? Did you say it was 30 existing units already?
So there's 98 existing townhomes right now, with the potential to build 30 more townhomes or use the density. As it's being improved right now, it would be 30 townhomes. So.
If you have your pointer, is that the upper?
Yep, that's correct, the northwest corner up here.
Is there an association there now?
Yes, there currently is an association. It was the original Mediterranean Master Association.
But there wouldn't be additionals for each pod, right?
Say again, I don't understand the question.
Separate association.
For each pod, I believe it'd be under a board member. Depending on who builds it out, there would be some master association with probably representation from each of the pods. There'd be some kind of structure where there'd be a master association that would manage for the whole community, because there are common area elements that we haven't spoken to, but there are common area elements, and there would be some kind of representation from the pods up to the master.
Okay, and I'm trying to figure out what these blue areas of water is, because at least the handouts that I have are not too clear. Is that
Lake? Yeah. I'm going to walk you through this real fast, just sort of a real quick walkthrough. With the redevelopment of the planned development, as you come in off Military Trail, one point of access, this element here, that's the existing pod with 98 townhouse units in it. There's an additional 30 units that could be built there or transferred throughout the thing. 1 unit here, 2 units there.
As you move down the loop road, this is now Boulevard, you're seeing pods A and B. Now that's adjacent to this lake system that runs through the entire project. That's part of our engineering requirement to hold our own water. Those lakes are in the same configuration as the original development. Move along. You get into two more separate pods on the other side of the road. Again, Grand Boulevard. I think it's C and D. Again, access points typically will come off one another. A lot of that stuff doesn't change from the original development, but we have to think now that with the efficiencies that we get with the apartment development versus the townhouse development that was hodgepodge all over this driveway, these are now very efficient within each of the pods, so much so that as I keep going around the development, around these new future pods, there's an existing last two pods there, and we just came in after that. I'll show you real fast. There is an existing rec building that may or may not stay, and then we leave the project. Everything in blue is lake, and everything in green is actually new green space preserve area that has come about because of the reconfiguration and efficiencies of going to the apartment design. And as you can see, there's an extensive network of pedestrian bike paths that will connect pods to get to some of these common area elements. This is all the benefits of being able to pull this back to independent, self-sustaining pods. And so you were absolutely right, board member. Lake in the middle, all the pods have access to it, that or green, and or their own elements of amenities, be it a rec center or a play area or sort of a greenway.
Additionally, on that same slide, I'm looking at those about midway through. I think it's red. Are those bridges? I guess
Those are bridges. Those are bridges over the water. And again, what you see here is these are walkways that go through the preserve areas, cross over the water on pedestrian bridges. So this is all pedestrian access through these greenways, which will be preserve areas. And that connects the pods back to the common area, clubhouse, pool, tennis courts, type amenities that will be located, in this location right here. It actually exists today. It's constructed. So there's a lot of thought put into the.
What's constructed?
The existing clubhouse.
Okay, I thought you meant the bridges. So those bridges aren't there.
No. That's all part of this new design.
And question to staff, was that in the original site plan? Because I got to express the sentiments of my colleague, Mr. Nudie. I mean, it does seem like we're amending the site plan ultimately, because we once this, if it's passed today, we won't see it again. Correct?
That's more than likely, unless something else is.
Anything else, Mr. McCoy?
In our preliminary discussions with staff, and this is why you have a site plan before you. This is cart before the horse for us, but it's a site plan there so that staff had a comfort level of what they would be expecting to see come through at an individual pod level. If something came in that deviated from a certain percentage, Ms. McKinney and her staff would basically make that call and say, you got to take this back to your planning board, you got to take it back to commission, whatever level is required to get that additional approval. But as it stands now, the fact that we can show them that this works parking-wise, building-wise, that we can fit the units, fit the parking, make it work, they can enact their staff level review, which would be whenever that home builder comes in to build it. So they've got the triggers and they've got the threshold by which if something doesn't jive with what you're seeing tonight, this plan that we created to give staff that comfort level, it would come back to you all.
Okay. Well, I want to hear from staff about that. They have those tools and monitoring devices. If it doesn't.
No, that's absolutely correct. And it has been something that has happened in the past and something that we've done before. And there are things that don't trigger that, and it is just a staff review.
I'm sorry. One more time, because I don't understand what
I was saying that is something that has happened in the past, depending on the type that what the main trigger of this one wasn't necessarily the configuration necessarily. That's one component of it, but the big trigger that brought this one back was going from fee simple to the luxury rental apartments was the main trigger that would be bringing this one back.
Okay, nothing further, Madam Chair.
Mr. Wiggins?
Yes, I have several comments, but several of my comments have already been answered. Personally, when I was looking at this, and then I went out in the area the other day to look at the site, I thought it was a very nice setup for what I'm seeing right here. But my biggest concern is a townhouse is a townhouse. We don't have any plans of what they're going to look like. That concerns me as well as does the other board members. Because in the past, we have had developers come in and tell us this is going to be the price range, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do. And the next thing we know, it's a different ball game of what they're putting up all together. I think some of you know what happened on Congress. A developer was supposed to put up houses, townhouses. We approved of it. Later on, nothing but townhouses. Not one home in there. Because it was not brought before us how it was going to look exactly. And I think that's what's concerning us tonight. We see a proposed site plan, but we do not see the type of buildings that are going to be located on this site plan. What's the price range? We don't know. The other question I have, do the people in the surrounding areas that are already developed been notified that this is going to be going up? Has it been publicized in the paper? Because I'm not seeing anyone here tonight to say whether they like it or dislike it. I think it's a nice layout, but I am concerned about what type of townhouse is going up there. I'd like to see an elevation of some sort of flow plan or something. That really concerns me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm passing the gavel to Mr. McCoy. I have a couple questions, please. Is there a master developer?
My client, BTI Partners, BTI Development, would be the master developer at this time.
And who are they?
BTI Development Partners. We have a representative here this evening, the senior asset manager for BTI. They're a large development and holding company based out of Miami, and they've picked up this asset with a group of other people. And they've got holdings all around the country and all around Florida, actually. If you go on their website, you can see some of the projects they work on. They're very, very large projects in and around the state.
Is that an acronym for three names? Do you know?
Breakstone Trust Investments.
And did they buy this out of foreclosure or bankruptcy? Do you know?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? You're asking questions that I think are best answered by Mr. Beck Daniel from BTI.
Thank you.
We acquired the property through the Community Development District debt, and we believed in the property, and so we bought the debt, hoping that it would perform, and it did not perform with the townhome plan that it previously had with the for sale product. So we ended up going through a foreclosure, and that's how we come to own the property at this point.
So you're an investment company, and so you don't really have a master developer so you're going, is that correct?
We have done developments, and we knew that going into this property, there was a chance that we could end up owning the asset. And that wasn't something we were afraid of, because we have the ability to be a master developer. We have projects. We've recently sold projects larger than this to Lennar Homes in Dade County, Florida, and in Naples, and We have a large contract on a similar project in Sarasota right now with Shea Homes, and we look to be a master plan community developer, but ultimately we have not typically been the vertical developer coming out of the ground with.
So how are you going to control the developers or the construction people who come in and build these various pods in these little regions? What happens if they don't perform or they can't perform? What happens to that part of the pod or the asset? Are you going to divvy them up into different, are you divvying them up?
As has been said, this is very early in the process, and everyone that we've reached out to has told us they need to see something that from the city that there's an allowance for a project that can work here, and that's why we're here today. I have to tell you, with the type of product that we're looking at, takedowns are for an apartment community, for it to be manageable and economical, it's typically 250 units and up. So you're not going to see more than 3 or 4 developers come in, and they would be a big brand developer to be able to take down something like this. And as to some of the other questions, when you look at a project this big, I don't believe there's a lot of 60-acre parcels in Riviera Beach available, so you're not going to see that. And we could have come in and said, we're going to do this piecemeal and drag you through this 5 times, but if this is what works for the project, and you don't know based on who these different builders are going to be, whether someone wants to be the piece by 95 that can be seen by the road versus someone wants the parcel up by Military Trail, it's just most effective for us and for you to get the best use for the project now, and then feel it out with the comfort of your department to oversee everything.
How are you going to prevent a hodgepodge look if the developers will all have, construction people all have different ideas of what this is going to look like?
As I said, with 50 acres, which is the remaining piece, with 50 acres and 3 to 4 developers, and each one doing 250 to 300 units or more, I think it would be difficult to get a hodgepodge look, because there's not planned to be broken up parcels within the pods. And as you can see, there's also very good separation that they've done in the design of the site, with separating with the lakes and the green areas, so that you're not going. It's not going to look patchwork.
Is this to scale?
Yes, ma'am. This is just a graphic rendering, but we provided a sort of technical plan like this that lays out the roads at the proper scale, all the pods. So there are big pods, there are smaller pods, variety, a mix of.
So what are we looking at? Is that to scale or is that a rendering?
It's to scale. It's just we just colored this. So what you're seeing are the massing of apartment buildings, 2-3-story style buildings that can handle all the number of units that were previously approved, and then the additional 70 that are sort of throughout the whole site. So that's the scale. The parking's accurate. The roadways are accurate. The buildings are accurate.
And does it change the appearance? Is this a significant change from the appearance of the original site plan with the fee simple properties? And do we still have that so we could see it with our own eyes? Mr. Stein? Okay.
Let me just find that for you, board member.
Madam Chair,
No,
while
good.
they're
I passed it to you. I passed the gavel to you.
okay. Staff, while he's working on that, the canal that's just to the south of it, who maintains that? Is that the city? Do you know? Because I think it's like borderline.
That's South Water Management District.
Oh, so the maintenance
South Water Management.
okay. And
I'm sorry, board member, I had a slide that showed the original master plan plugged in an aerial. I don't know if it miraculously disappeared or not.
Do we have it in our files?
I don't have it.
Mr. Stein, do we have it in our files?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It's conditional.
This may be a question for the actual the gentleman that just came up. But what's the occupancy of the at least those 90 units that's there now?
The owner occupancy for the units, the 98 townhouses that are there now, about 30 are owner occupied. The remainder, all 98 are, or the majority of them are occupied, but only about 30 are owner occupied. The rest are actually being subleased and are rented.
And what's the square footage of these apartments?
The
1, 2, and 3 bedroom units.
The ones being proposed,
Yes, sir.
we don't have that because we don't have the architecture component of this. This is just amending the master plan, the bubble diagram. The site plan we've given you is helps everyone understand how it would lay out, but we don't have those finite numbers of the architecture or what it would look like. It's too preliminary in the process. Amending the PUD to allow for this will then trigger the ability for builders to come in and put in their building designs, be it Mediterranean, be it Key West, whatever the units these builders believe are selling or the market for South Florida. So that's not information that we just don't have.
I have a question too, and I'm looking at this last page of the meeting packet in the. I guess this is a letter or notice from Kotler and Hearing. Kotler. Well, looking at the second to the last paragraph, landscape design and buffering. And it says, each residential part will submit a detailed technical landscape plan that will be formally approved at the time formal site plan approval is sought. So at what point is that? Because I thought we already established that.
Landscaping gets, with the exception of what's already.
On a day-to-day basis, landscape permits are submitted to us and we review them to make sure they're in compliance with the landscape code. So that's what we would do on a case-by-case scenario for each pod. They would submit for a permit or a landscape and we would approve.
So not for the landscape, not the actual site plan.
It's possible for the site plan as well. That's correct.
It's possible. So maybe it will come back, is what you're saying now.
I don't know that.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
Again, if certain things don't trigger a secondary review by the board, then it can just be a staff level review.
But what is that threshold? I mean, like for instance, give me an example of something that would trigger, because
Going from fee simple to rental units.
right, and then I go back to the sentiments that Mr. Canuti initially started with. Then we're actually changing the original site plan. We're amending
And
the
that's a
original.
possibility, and that's something that at a staff level we have done on other things, but again, it's be by a pod case scenario.
Okay, I'm finished, Madam Chair. If you so choose, you can.
Back. I'm
Yes.
not quite ready. This Mediterranean PUD agreement amendment refers to the conceptual site plan. Is that what this is?
Right, this is the proposed site plan right here.
It says conceptual.
What was the question?
It says it's conceptual. So are you looking for us to conceptually approve this, or are you looking for an approval of the project as submitted?
We're looking for a recommendation of the board tonight to either approve or deny what is submitted by the applicant for an amendment to the already approved PUD.
And just one more question, sir. You may have answered this and I didn't hear it or something. If you have a developer who comes in and cannot finish the project, what happens to those? What happens to the remainder Does it become an eyesore, or what happens? Who's responsible?
I think that this is actually
Prime
an
example.
of your question itself. The initial development came through at an inopportune time as far as housing development went. Only a very small portion of the units were built. So it went through a legal process. A different owner now owns land, owns the rights to the land. So there's a process behind it. I think overall staff is looking for an approval of the modification from the fee simple townhomes to rental units. And there's a lot of planning details that no matter how units are configured, no matter how parking is configured, there's going to be maximum thresholds for density. There's going to be limits as far as how many parking spaces are required. And what this is really asking for is saying, hey, we have an approval for a residential development. They're fee simple units. What has happened actually in the city with other developments that progressed along and they were built out prior to the housing bubble is at this stage a lot of speculative buying has occurred, and these units are now rented by random landlords that are in the country, out of the country. Some are great landlords, some are absentee landlords. So what this is asking for is the possibility for them to come back, be able to propose this to potential developers and say, hey, we're not going to do fee simple units. We're going to come up with an actual rental plan because that's what the market can actually basically keep afloat right now. A lot of people are choosing to rent over owning a home, and having a master association that's actually responsible for the entire community, it's really a major benefit because you don't have 100 landlords in one unit renting to 100 different people. You have one master association that's responsible for background checks, for anything else associated with the community. So it's a heightened sense of reliability, of value, and it creates something that previously is completely unmarketable, an asset that it won't work, to something that they can present to developers and say, hey, look, we're going to meet these density requirements, we're going to meet these parking requirements, and that's what the conceptual plan shows. So as far as seeing an actual building elevation, and talking about the shingles or the shutters, it's in their best interest to put forth the most appealing design possible because they're trying to rent it. Being a renter is the best situation, in my opinion, possible because you're not bound by anything. If you want to leave after your lease is up, you can do so. So being that the rental market is so competitive right now, it's in their best interest to try to find the best product possible. And I think that actually having the preserve areas, the walkways throughout the community is actually an improvement to what the original site plan showed.
But what happens when one of the builders can't finish the project? Who's responsible? Because by then you have other renters and landlords, or you have homeowners. I understand what just happened, and I appreciate what you're saying, but how do you prevent that? Who's responsible?
Board member, I discussed that, and I think we are going to be improving the potential if they do sell off to a home builder. That home builder is now going to be responsible for whatever that purchase is. So if they buy all the pods, that home builder is going to be responsible for taking over that whole project. If it's 2 or 3 builders, that gets worked out amongst what they end up buying. And I think that's a safer bet in terms of not having such a big sort of bite to handle at one time. Like the original design, where there was no breaking up of the development. There were some base communities, but they bled all over the main driveway. Now it's really partitioned off so that, like you said, if Pod H, something happens and Pod H can't be built out, they can be responsible to a certain point, but it's the person who owns that pod at the end of the day.
All right, so the person across the street is going to be whoever is living there is going to be looking at a development that's partly finished. I'm just trying to figure out what happens to those people who bought these luxury or rentals, and they're staring at a whole development of pods that.
The only thing that I've seen.
What's the recourse for them?
The only thing that I've seen in certain communities where there are different ownerships, and the one board member had mentioned examples, Abacoa, for example, and some residential communities have been developed over the years, and others have sat and are only being developed now. They look at vacant fields for years and years and years, but some of the homeowners, some of the development approvals for some of these communities, they had to put their buffers in advance, for example. So you wouldn't be looking at an empty field, for example. You may be looking at least a treed and hedged buffer around that. So I mean, there are definitely items that be built into that as part of selling off the pods or half the development, and securing those boundaries if they can't come to the finish line. It's the same situation they're in right now. The one developed parcel in the northwest corner is looking at a completely vacant property all around them. And it's just too much of a bite for the whole thing to get developed. And by parceling it off and breaking up the way it is, we're actually going to limit that down and, at least provide a more staged and better process by which to protect against that, so that someone doesn't come along and potentially end up in the same situation with the entire development sitting vacant.
And I can appreciate that. I think one of my concerns is that it could very easily happen again, and I know there's no way to control it, but there doesn't seem to be a continuity. There's not. I mean, right now, all of those look the same, those pods, and they're not. We don't even know what they are. And there's no control. There's no architectural control. Maybe that's not the proper word.
I understand
or structural.
I understand what you're saying, with respect to consistency from pod A to pod B to pod C.
But you don't want a cookie cutter either.
Exactly. And I think that's, I'm going to go to this example because we've worked on Abacoa for decades. And it's evolved in a way that you've got single-family homes next to apartment buildings, next to townhouse developments in different communities, and separated by their buffers, but by lakes, by green space. But that natural occurrence within each community, there's the consistency. So pod A is going to be consistent, and if a developer buys up half the development, they could put in 4 or 5 different product types and create that diversity throughout the pods. Having two or three builders would create the same thing. Again, architectural standards are going to be defined and reviewed by staff, and if there's something that deviates to the point where they aren't comfortable with it, it gets kicked up to you folks. That's the standard procedure. And the safeguards are there, I think, and that's why I understand Mr. Riggins' concern. He can't see anything, but we have nothing to show. Well, we just need to get the entitlements just modified to be able to start to enact the site plans. If someone comes in with a grand plan and wants to change this in any way beyond what we see here tonight, this plan that works and that you're going to see laid out tonight, it'll come back to you.
If I may, I think that it's interesting that the design, I guess the cookie cutter but not cookie cutter example was used. Today, new urbanism and planning theory is really a hot topic, and it's basically trying to create an old sense of an old development, our old city, and how it kind of organically formed and have different development designs, different uses. So I think also personal preference kind of drives the architectural theme. So, and once again, it's to their benefit to have the most architecturally pleasing, most amenities, because they're going to be trying to rent it. And also having this pod breakdown allows them to really match market demand. So let's say right now, let's make an example, there's a huge demand for 1 or 2 bedroom apartments. So they can utilize certain pods to build out that market demand.
Wait a minute, let's stop with that, just what you said. Who makes that determination of where that pod, for that specific use? Maybe it won't be a house. Maybe it'll be I don't know, let's say a business or something, or another use. I mean, why not have a plan that says, all right, this is going to be here, we're going to have housing here, a rec center over there, and you can build it in a certain fashion. I don't mean to be so restrictive, but so it's more of a plan, so it's more planned. Do you see them?
I understand what you're saying. The only use being proposed is going to be residential or facility associated with that residential facility. So you don't anticipate seeing it sort of commercial, industrial, any other type of zoning activity or use within development. As far as having a model to go by, there could be a typical elevation, but once again, we want to be able to have flexibility for the developer. If a certain design style is popular this year, and next year there's a different design style that's now the new in fad, and everyone wants to rent that design style, you don't want to have them constrained for specific design elements that were associated with an initial approval.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
It's just re-looking at this, and it says BTI Developers, Inc. as managing partner for owner entity Mediterranean Palm Property Subsidiary. So if Mediterranean is a subsidiary of who or what?
We're the development side of our partnership, and the partners are just the financial side of it. And together we joined to make an entity. And then Mediterranean Palm Subsidiary is the subsidiary that we used to take possession of the land. So that's what's on the deed. So we felt like that was the best entity to be signing off on.
So there's another level of ownership.
It's not, it's our partners, but.
I understand, but there's another level of ownership of whoever wrote the checks for the property, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got then that level of ownership, then Mediterranean Palm Property Subsidiary, then BTI Developers, then.
Actually, we're part of the top ownership.
Okay.
And underneath, our partnership with them is the top ownership, and then
So
Mediterranean
you're an
Palm
equity,
Subsidiary.
BTI has an equity stake in this?
Yes, we do.
The other question, as far as all this is concerned, we're talking about changing this to 900 and something rental units. Not that I study the market, but it seems to me that what I've been reading is that the next bubble in real estate is the overbuilding of rental apartments. And I don't claim to be a forecaster, but I've seen it a number of times. So I think based on all of the things we talked about, this board relinquishing all its control to staff. Not that we don't trust you, but some of you guys can hit the lottery, and disappear. And so I think this board, as the planning arm of the city of Riviera Beach, needs to have some say in each of those pods as they get developed. Now, who knows? If I'm right on my forecast and rental apartments, we may be saying somewhere along the way, hey, the last 7 pods need to be fee simple. So I don't think we should relinquish that. So I don't know how long it's going to take you to find out how we, I'd like to see Mediterranean move forward, but I'd like to also have this board involved in each of those architectural decisions, because this is the board that sets the standard.
I believe if you feel that strongly about it, then I would include that in your motion and have that
Well,
to see the phases come back.
Well, I've taken it a different way. Brad said that he doesn't know if that can happen. Okay? He doesn't know if that can happen. So I think what we need to do is personally table this until the next meeting, and that could be 2 weeks from now. You figure out how we proceed, if we can do that or can't do that. All right? And at that point in time, we'll be a more informed board, and we could then say, we don't want to approve it this way, or we'll approve it with these benchmarks that every time a site plan comes in, we take a look at it and we give our recommendation.
Sorry for the interruption, board member. We would ask that you make it a condition of approval that if you need to see the site plans come back to you for each of the pods, we'll take that as a recommended condition of approval this evening. And that way it can be, staff can research it, but we need to move along with this on behalf of my client. I would prefer not to table it for 2 weeks. We'll take that condition. We're more than happy.
Well, the problem is, though, if that condition can't be met, because Mr. Stein's not sure it can be met. So if it can't be met, we've already given the approval.
I think it's slightly different. I think A is whether or not the code specifically requires that each phase, due to acreage or other specific requirements, is required by code to come to the board. I think that's what was under discussion before. I think B is whether or not the board chooses to add a condition of approval that you choose to see each development come in as they are proposed, irregardless of what the code states. So let's say the minimum acreage the code states was 5 acres, and pod C is 2 acres. Condition of approval stated that you wish to see each pod presented to the planning and zoning board.
I don't understand what size has to do with it. Basically, what we're saying is that...
I use size because the code may reference a specific size development or specific threshold, some sort of trigger that would cause either an administrative approval or a full review through planning and zoning board and city council.
Well, we're back to where we started, okay? We're going to give approval to something, okay, with the condition that may be invalid, okay? So what I'm saying is, let's get the answer to those questions so that if we move forward and approve it and we have the responsibility or the right to approve each of the site plans as they come through here, we're done with it. 2 weeks, they can move on forever, But to approve it, to say, okay, we're going to raising the density to where it is increasing the property value, okay, period. So, we then lose control, okay, of what goes on that property. These guys can turn around once they get the new density and sell it off to somebody, okay? Then where are we? So I think there's just too many variables for us to say, let's go ahead with this with the condition that we made, which may not be a legitimate condition.
Did you find the overlay for Mediterranean, the first?
No, we don't have
Okay,
it here.
all right.
Believe it or not, I may have, if I was on the board that approved.
We have it in our office. We don't have it here
Oh,
right now.
understood, okay.
All right, more comments? We have a motion, please? Someone?
I make motion that we postpone voting on this project until we get a clearer indication of how this board can retain the right to approve each of the site plans as they come in.
Table to what time?
Next meeting, whenever you guys can get it together. If it's 2 weeks, that's fine. If it's a month from now, whatever, that's in your hands. We can do it in 2 weeks, that's fine. I'm sure all the board members will be happy to do that.
Is there a second?
Here's the original plan. I just closed it and reopened it.
We have a motion on the floor.
Madam Chair.
All in favor?
Madam Chair, before we go to vote, can we take a look at what staff just put up here?
So I point of order, there's a motion, second on the floor.
Julius Wiggum?
What are we voting, yes or no?
Well, however you want.
Huh?
However, either to bring this back next.
If
Mr.
we vote yes, that'll bring it back.
That'll postpone it for 2 weeks.
Okay. Yes, we'll bring it back again. No means it's just out. Yes.
Renee James?
Yes.
Edward Kennedy?
Yes.
Frederick McCoy?
Yes.
Marie Davis?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Thank you.
Item taken for next meeting.
Is it next meeting or 2 weeks?
Yeah, 2 weeks is the 22nd. Thanksgiving.
It would probably have to be next
Thanksgiving.
meeting considering Thanksgiving.
And Thanksgiving.
Okay, we'll move to our unfinished business. We're at unfinished business now. Reasonable accommodation ordinance.
Madam Chair, can I just ask a
Yes.
question? That existing site plan from the old Mediterranean that you had up there, you might want to get it to everybody.
Could you please repeat the question? Excuse me.
I said that existing site plan you just had up of the old Mediterranean, that's what it looked like.
Okay, I closed it out, I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to close, no, you don't have to bring it back up. I'm just saying, send,
Yeah, we
email
can,
it to
yeah, we
everybody.
should just recover.
Thank you,
Okay, we
Madam
are on
Reasonable accommodation.
unfinished business. Okay, so I didn't mention it under additions or deletions, but I did receive additional comments from Ms. James. So I wanted to thank her for those comments, but I also wanted to, not school, but I guess remind the board about sunshine laws. So if response to emails or emails sent to staff, just send it to staff. Don't copy everyone, because the opportunity for other board members to start replying all could violate sunshine laws. So just be very careful if it's reply all and just send it to staff.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just have a question. I thought about that, but because this was just like language we were going over to draft, that's why I copied all. So in a situation like that where we're just going over draft language, don't do that because this wasn't an issue.
It's a workshop,
It is.
right?
Well,
Was it a workshop?
So I was thinking, it was just language.
the previous language was workshop, but this information was advertised for tonight's meeting. So if the board chose to approve draft language, they could. So I'm just a reminder, just be careful. If you have any questions at all, you're better off just sending it right to me, and I'll distribute it. That way, everyone's clear and safe, and there's no potential issues.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
sandwich approach. Once again, thank you for your comments, because we don't always get a significant amount of comments, and there were valid comments that were provided to staff. So on page,
May I comment too about this last project? I think we would like, I got the sense that we would like to be more involved in helping staff with some of the decisions that, like, as an example with this project. I mean, I know that you all have the final say-so, and I know that there are certain triggers, but I think that, you know, we don't have an architectural commission, and we don't have a landmarks commission, and I think that, I mean, there are some months that we don't meet, and I think that we could probably, our responsibilities could probably be increased a little to, with regard to some items on that project. Mr. Canuti talked about bringing back the various pods or developments. I think it's important that we be more involved. All right, any comments? Yes, sir?
I don't have any more comments than that. So it's midway through your packet. Section 1 is the first page. You can tell the draft's updated because there's on the bottom right version 2 should be in blue. Scroll down so I can go to the screen as well. Now, I don't know if we just want to go over specific comments that Ms. James had submitted. We can talk through those and inform us of additional comments along the way. If they can object, if that's the best way to proceed. I know we have seen the language before. Really, there's been no major modifications since that time. Any proposed changes are shown straight through or underlined. So the first comment that Ms. James had was the actual title for letter I under B application. And after rereading it, I modified it. I didn't modify it exactly how she had provided it, but I still modified it just for clarity, I thought. So I don't know if we want to go through each item and...
Can you just scroll down to that part so
sorry.
we can see it on the screen? So he's saying right there in I, in the blue. I also asked for the one right under it for contents, just so we could have some type of consistency in what we call the application. Because it is the name of the application. It starts off request for. And then we go down to contents and we go back and say reasonable accommodation request application. Just maintaining consistency with naming conventions throughout the document.
So you would like to see, instead of reading contents of reasonable accommodation request application,
Right, have
have
it
it be
read the
consistent
same
with the same as
as
above.
the blue. And I'm good with that page.
Okay, any other comments on that page?
Madam Chair, I had one comment on that page as it related to another page. It says under B, application, a request by a disabled individual for reasonable accommodation. And then on page 3 of the application, please provide the following information if you are requesting an accommodation order to house more than 3 unrelated people in a single-family dwelling. The one is, the way it reads is an individual is making an application. The way this reads is somebody wants to house 3 people. So am I reading it wrong?
No, you're not. I think that what we can do is add under B application, instead of just reading a request by a disabled individual for reasonable accommodation, potentially change that to a request by an applicant or disabled individual. As long as that's legally
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just have a question why we want to say both. Why do we have to say applicant or disabled individual?
I personally feel like it's important to say both because either the individual that is claiming a disability or an applicant on their behalf can submit.
They would still be the applicant. I was just, the additional language like disabled individual. So the applicant can be a disabled individual or it can be someone applying on their behalf, but they're still an applicant. That was just my reason.
Yeah, and I did add where you had describe removing disabled persons. You'll see, especially on page 2, applicant or, so if that's something the board and legal department feels we can remove disabled individual and applicant is sufficient, then it is called out here, so whatever the board's directive is, as long as it's legally sufficient. It works.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
it just seems like applicant is all encompassing, because I may be doing it for a cousin or a relative. I'm not disabled, and I mean, you can't go wrong with the applicant, and I'm not a legal connoisseur, but I mean, it just seems like that's befitting.
Okay.
What we can do is place a clause in here that generally introduces an applicant as either a disabled individual or a qualifying entity, and then from there on, you can just say applicant.
I like that.
But if it were just, say, a relative, is that really an entity?
Yeah, I think a relative would qualify as a qualifying entity. Do we have a board consensus on that language? We'll add a clause early on that explains applicant to mean basically both. It would say applicant means both disabled individual or qualifying entity.
Or legal representative. We can tweak the terms of it. I don't think we should mesh a representative with a qualifying entity. Based on, if you look on subsection A, we define a qualifying entity based on the DCF level treatment. So I don't want to intertwine that. I mean, you can make it over-inclusive, applicant, as a disabled individual and or legal representative or qualifying entity. We can tweak that.
Okay. Yeah, that will basically refer to almost all of the additions on page 2. Unless the board member sees something else. Then moving to page 3, the resulting changes here were from the previous planning and zoning board meeting to adjust the time frame as far as responses from the city and from the applicant so that it was 30 days consistently for both parties or all parties involved.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just had a question for staff on page 3. I had wanted to add an additional sentence at the end of section D because I wasn't clear if anything, if the applicant didn't respond with additional information, they have to apply for at that time they have to submit a new application, right? Or how does that work? Like, they submit an application, they were given the 30 days to respond with additional information, they never responded, so then the application is closed out.
I see. So you want a statement that explains the process if these timeframes aren't met. The next step, so something basically, if a time period allotted expires, then a new application will have to be submitted.
Right.
Something along those lines.
And that was the last bullet for draft, page 3 of 3. Add as last sentence to the section, a new application may be submitted. I know we're only giving them one time to submit it. They don't complete it, they can apply again. I didn't.
Oh, okay. I may have skipped over that by accident when I was reviewing
Madam Chair.
it. Okay,
Yes, sir.
I understand what you mean by that.
Well, question to staff and legal, isn't that understood already? Because once you're denied or for whatever reason you're not able to complete an application process and you don't send in the required information, I mean, you are certainly free to apply again. I mean, that's already understood, correct?
I didn't understand.
Well, it doesn't specifically say you can't, so it's already understood.
I think we can add for clarity.
Okay, and
Just the more clear direction we have is probably positive for everybody.
and I concur, but let me explain why I think that, because I think this is the third meeting at least that we've seen this, and I don't want to continue to delay. I just find that sometimes, it's a back and forth process, which is good because I think we're thoroughly vetting out the language and we all have the best interests of the city, but it almost seems like we are, carrying on with this a little long. And when I attended the workshop last month, one of the comments I heard by the city council members was that on the arcade ordinance, they said, well, Planning and Zoning Board had it for 4 months, and everybody was in such disbelief like we were incompetent. And I don't want to seem like that if for whatever reason we are just, making delays, not deliberately, but I think it does require that level of scrutiny, but, the going back and forth, which also brings me to another point. As we stand right now, if a person needed that accommodation, we don't have this ordinance. This ordinance is not effective right now. So what happens now? I know we have a proposed stay of enforcement that's included in it, but I mean, as we stand now, because I really didn't agree with the whole changing of the 30-day period, because this ordinance clearly addresses that there would be no enforcement during that time period. So
I think there's two questions. The first one in regards to board response time. I think the adult arcade item is pretty, let's call it a special item. I think there's a lot of questions associated with still due to state laws that may or may not be in the works. So I wouldn't base all of your judgment on just that one item. So I think using this as a better example, I think this is kind of more of a typical process where it was workshop previously, the staff wasn't really looking for any type of recommendation. The information was provided, then we get a little bit more feedback last meeting, and we're at a stage now where I think we're really close to a final product.
I agree.
To answer the second question, as far as what procedures we have in place now, we would follow any ADA or FHA guidelines that are in place. However, we would almost have to defer to our legal staff versus having an approved set of guidelines in place for staff to work on. So instead of having the clear path, we basically have to take more time in order to make sure we're doing the process just right versus having the road already paved for us.
And I would agree, Mr. Gagnon, and I would definitely like to hear what legal says. But just before she addresses it, if she has the response for that, so suppose when this comes back in the month of December, and I don't want to see that we get back up here and we go back through this again, and then there comes a ton of recommendations, then it goes back to you guys, and then it won't be until after the new year. You see what I mean?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
staff, we could approve this tonight. If there is no more additions or whatnot, we could make a recommendation to approve this tonight with what we've submitted. Correct?
That is 100% possible. I think that in the past there has been, I'll say, an ordinance that gets to this point where it has been vetted, there's been discussion, there's been additions, deletions, and it's kind of worked to a form where people are all in agreement. If there's still some minor tweaks, the actual motion to approve can address those. So you could say, a motion to approve with X, Y, and Z, and then it could be amended prior to going to city council.
Now, specifically, since that's the case, I would like to see it go that direction because the going back and forth thing just is a little much for me. So I assume you've been noting these recommendations specifically, and we could just make a motion to approve conditional with those changes. Is that possible?
Yes, it is possible. It's to everyone's benefit if it's possible to list off whatever amendments you're looking for in the motion itself. If it's a really long list, oftentimes staff's willing to recap what was discussed throughout the discussion to make sure nothing's missed in the motion itself.
Okay.
Mr. Wiggins? Oh, excuse me, Mrs. Stubbs.
Madam Chair, just to Mr. McCoy's issue regarding if someone was to request, for, let's say, a reasonable accommodation while this is pending. We do and have looked to ADA and FHA laws, and you have to conditionally approve it. I mean, you have to follow ADA and FHA. The city is required to. So, in the meantime, you may make provisional grants, based on federal law.
Thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Gagnon, are you finished?
Yeah, I think, so we just discussed the addition of
Excuse me.
what
Let me clarify this one. I'm not sure you answered my question. The application is a request by a disabled individual, and then on page 3 of the application, it says, please provide the following information if you are requesting an accommodation order to house more than 3 related people. So wouldn't that, if that's the case, wouldn't that each individual have to fill out an application? It just seems contradictory. If an individual is filling it out, how can I fill one out for 3 people?
It could be someone acting on multiple individuals' behalfs, whether it's a legal entity, whether it's, I guess there's multiple scenarios, but an applicant could be somebody that is going through the process for multiple people seeking reasonable accommodation.
Okay, all right, that's a good point. So then we really have to say 2 or more. Because what happens?
I think there's
Unless there's
specific-
language in a law that says 3 or more.
I think there was case law that drove that specific wording.
Okay, you clarified it, thanks.
Okay, so I think we'll add the additional language describing if the 30-day period isn't met, then a new application can be filed. That was the end of page 3. We can go on to the first page of the actual application. I don't think we had additional feedback on that page. Ms. James pointed out at the bottom of page 2, somehow the second portion of question 4, which actually was question 5 already, was morphed into one question, question 4. So that's stricken through, and that question is asked independently as number 5 of the application.
You're still asking 2 questions here. Please describe the accommodation you need. What rules, question 1, number 2, what rules, regulations, or policies would you like the city of Riviera Beach to waive for your dwelling? That's 2 different questions. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you can leave it that way or, make it another question.
Yeah, it's I guess really a formatting preference.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Ms. James.
Yeah, it is still 2 different ones, but it's not like the same one being repeated. So,
I think there is
I didn't have a problem with leaving the 2 and the 4. It was just that the end of 4 and 5 were saying the same thing.
think there is a continuity between the questions, even though they are two separate questions and they could stand alone. I think that having them together kind of assists in the actual completion of the application. It also makes it look less daunting as well. So instead of having 10, it says 8.
I was simply pointing it out.
Additional comment that Ms. James had was in reference to the bottom of page 3, asking if why is the size of each bedroom and window required for the reasonable accommodation application? So to try to clarify that further in the application, the underlined section just says to ensure compliance with building and health codes. So that's, I guess, the reason why in the question itself. And I didn't see any comments or questions on page 4. Page 5, once again, refers to the applicant or individual discussion we had previously. The strike-through and underline addition midway through page 5 was a result of comments we received at the last meeting. Those are all the comments I had today. I'd also attached as Exhibit A, page 1 and 2, after the last page, the actual definitions for the standards for residential treatment. So it actually has the categories listed here. That was just for board reference. That was requested at last meeting.
Finished? Are you waiting for us?
I'm ready for any other board comments.
Comments? Mr. Canoe?
None.
Ms. James? Mr. McCoy?
No, Madam Chair.
Mr. Wiggum? Someone like to make a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we recommend approval to the reasonable accommodation ordinance and submit to City Council with the changes we went over tonight.
We have a second?
Second.
Renee James?
Yes.
Edward Kennedy?
Yes.
Julius Wiggum?
Yes.
Frederick McCoy?
Yes.
Marie Davies?
Yes.
Renee McCoy? Motion approved.
Thank you. Our next general discussion, public comments. We have Mr. Gerald Ward.
Good evening, Gerald Ward, 31 West 20th Street. 3 items, the first of which is the CRA. Your minutes that you approved tonight for the 11th of October, 6 of 6 page, clearly indicated that you wanted to be involved and you need to be involved in the CRA's demands for 5 revised development elements from the so-called Marina District Master Developer Viking element. This has a requirement that they respond back by the 31st of December. It's nice to come in through the holidays, and I'm always sure that there will be delays. But it produced a short fuse for your action after the 31st of December. to review new plans for the Marina District, 25 acres. So your request to have somebody here needs to be reemphasized so that you get a feel for what's going on in terms of the CRA's desires before the Viking folks respond. Number two is the Port of Palm Beach has a meeting next week, and I would like staff to give each of you a copy of the agenda for that meeting on the 14th of November. There are two items, E12, which is the initial parking garage study. They have decided to go with a separate parking garage, which is part of the CRA plan. That's why you need to know about the CRA plans. And that will be contracted by the 21st of March 2013. Item G2 is engaging the port consultant to do a rezoning application to you for the State Road 710 reconnection parcel down at the south boundary of town from State Road 5 to Old Dixie, 5.2 acres. The next meeting of the Palm Beach County Land Use Board is on the 14th of December. They did not hold the meeting this month, so you need to consider acting in November on this matter. Number three, last night the city issued a purchase contract for $6.6 million for 12 to 13 acres at 1481 13th Street, which has also got a 1481 15th Street address, to do a whole lot of changes. We told them they needed a comp plan amendment. The city attorney agreed with me and said, then agreed to say, well, if we don't do it and we buy the property, then we've got the property. They got the cart before the horse is what the five have done. So that property was bought in July of last year for $5.1 million, and they're going to buy it on the 28th of December for $6.6, but then have deferred possession for 16 months, and while the seller gets another $1.16 million from the current tenant, which is the same port constructor. Lastly, I thought your actions for the first item of the new business tonight reminded me of how this board produced and performed in the 80s. You asked super nice questions, and I think the action when staff would not give you a clear direction was absolutely appropriate. Don't do something that could be construed multiple ways. So you're performing well. Now, the next thing is you need to get the board full up to strength. Instead of 6, you need 9.
Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Why don't you recommend some people?
I can't get anybody to seem to show up to council. And guess how many showed up tonight with me? Me.
Planning and Zoning Board comments?
Yeah, just a comment on Mr. Ward's comment on the marina. You were there today, Ms. Davis, at the presentation, and I had kind of unofficially talked with Tony and Mr. Evans a while back and said basically that this board really needs to have some workshops on the marina in pieces, not the whole thing, but in pieces, so that we can, one, notice it so we can get some public input, and then familiarize ourselves with it. And I think you made that comment today too. So I think they're on board with doing that.
Okay, Ms. James? Mr. McCoy?
Yes, Madam Chair. A few things. I want to commend staff on working to get those audio minutes online, well, the audio recordings, online, even though we couldn't get us actual video recording on the local access channel, simply because a situation like Mr. Ward just got up, he gave us a lot of good information, and I don't want to have to wait until 3 weeks later when those minutes are produced, and when the minutes are published, to actually get that information. So I think that's a vital tool. At least it promotes the transparency, and it also gives us access to that information without necessarily having to reach out to staff every time. And then too, there was something that I noticed in the newspaper recently, and it was relating to these donation boxes that's been appearing. I know Palm Beach County had banned them in for unincorporated Palm Beach County, and I think they did good in doing so because they're unregulated. And one of the things that I've noticed, and I have an article here, and I'm going to just read briefly something from the article, if that's okay, Madam Chair.
Certainly.
Commissioners voted 4-3 to prohibit all drop-off donation bins and collection stations in unincorporated areas, and to instruct staff to work on the details and the language of an ordinance. And I'm going to skip down a little bit. And this is why I really think it's something that we should look into. County administrators say a large number of donation boxes were illegally installed by for-profit companies at sites across the county earlier this year. The move angers some local charities who say for-profit companies are taking clothes, shoes, and other goods away from them. Now, just that alone, I mean, at least for the reputable, long-standing charities that we have in the city, Goodwill being, I think, the noticeable one that's over on Broadway. I see these boxes that's showing up, and I really dislike it because there's no regulations, and it's for a for-profit company. And most citizens, when they have those type of items, they just want to get rid of them, but they don't necessarily know that that item that they're putting in there is turning a profit for someone. So, I mean, I think we should kind of be forward-looking and looking into some of those type things. And one last thing, I wanted to bring this up a couple meetings ago. I think it might have been the October meeting. But, when we've had these requests to meet these folks outside of, these individual requests, I think I told staff that I felt very uncomfortable with the way it went. And, so I'm making a proclamation on record. I don't want to do that again. And going forward, I won't meet with anyone. And I strongly suggest, my colleagues to consider that, because a lot of times these people, these lobbyists or whatever these interested parties in, they, do present you with a lot of information. They try to lead you to believe a certain thing. And more specifically, I'll go ahead and say it, the electric fence ordinance that we took up, and also I must want to say that because I think we skipped out a little early last month on the comments, but I commend staff because that photo that staff had put up there was very telling. I mean, I can't support anything like that. We had a kid that was, if it was possible, within reaching distance of an electric fence. And I just don't think that that's something that we should have in our city. So I commend staff for their work in, getting us that information. And a lot of times when you meet with these outside parties, you don't have all the information. So I would caution the board against that. So I think those are my comments, Madam Chair. Thank you again, staff.
Mr. Wiggum?
Yes, I'd like to thank staff for getting all this material to us before tonight's meeting so that we can review it. I think you did a good job putting it together. And I'd like to thank the board for taking the time to review it. The reason I'm saying is I am sick and tired of developers coming into the city of Riviera Beach with their halfway plans saying one thing and we don't have proof of what they're going to do. And then when we approve it, they change the thing all the way around because we really have no plan. I think they're beginning to see this now. I have seen too much in my 12 or 13 years on this board go bad thinking we're going to do good. We have rezoned land in this city for residential homes only so that we could bring our young people back to town in Riviera Beach. Almost all of that land now sits with townhouses, and that was our plan when we changed it. I want to thank the board for what you did tonight, and I want to thank the staff for what you did to get this to us. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wiggum.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Sorry. I'm in a hurry.
Two things rather briefly. Mr. McCoy, if you could provide a link to that article, a digital copy of that article,
Sure,
Mark,
most
anything,
most
that'd be
definitely. How about I do this? If I can go on the record and give you the title of the article, you can just look it
Yeah,
up.
that'd be great.
But I think that's something that, and I'm not exactly sure how staff works when they, come about new things that could be potentially an issue in the city relating to those things.
What I'm
But
going to do is I'm going to send our code enforcement administrator an email to see if they've noticed this out in the field. And if it seems to be something that they need language to actually deal with, then we can look into language. There are some things, oftentimes they want to place those bins in established parking areas, which they wouldn't be allowed to do, or they want to place them in areas that are designated for landscaping or drainage. That's also something that the code wouldn't allow them to do. So there may be other code sections that would prohibit them from doing that, but if you provide me that info, I can pass it along.
most definitely. And let me also note in this article, here's one sentence. Property managers say the boxes often appear in shopping center parking lots without notice, and the recyclers don't return calls asking for their removal. So a lot of times the owner doesn't even, have knowledge. And those things are pretty big. And just today, I was coming to this meeting and I seen someone actually depositing clothes into it, and it was on 28th Street in Old Dixie. But the name of the article is actually Palm Beach County to ban donation boxes in unincorporated areas. And that was published on September 25th, 2012.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Kennedy.
I concur with Mr. McCoy. I think that's something that's been kind of ramping up around, around Florida, around the country, these for-profit boxes. Why doesn't staff investigate the possibility of let's just create an ordinance prohibiting it in the city? And we probably we could probably copy Palm Beach County.
Wow. I think that's a good idea.
So do we have a motion?
Well, I'll tell you what, I don't know if we should do that because actually they just actually did a moratorium ban on it, and they're bringing it back for actual draft ordinance, so I don't even think they've actually completed it yet. So, I mean...
So we'll wait until, are you suggesting we wait until?
I would just suggest staff looks into it if that's... Mr. Canuti made the recommendation or suggestion.
Well, yeah, no, what I'm saying is take a look at what the county's done, and that might be the model for what we want to do.
Right. It sounds as if they put the moratorium in place just to prohibit it for now until staff has time to actually develop regulations to follow. That's what it seems from the information that's been presented, that's the level that they're at. But I have no problem communicating interdepartmentally, seeing if they are spreading up around the city. One of the best things to do is to model a new ordinance after a break ordinance, let's say West Palm just passed.
You did get the title of the article.
Yes, Palm Beach County to ban the donation boxes, and that's as far as I got, but I know it's September 26, 2012. So
25th, September 25th.
September 25th, 2012.
Palm Beach County to ban donation boxes.
He already has it on his iPhone.
Okay, great. And I probably would imagine that there's probably one right over on Broadway in that 3700, between 3700 block and 3400 block of Broadway, right where Goodwill is. So,
I think
if
there's
you
one
will.
right in that Goodwill parking.
Yeah, I think it is. And that kind of goes against everything that Goodwill stands for, because we have no clue who these people are, So, I mean, they're making a profit. I can pretty much assure you they're probably not even licensed in the city. I don't know if our code requires that they be licensed just for a donation receptacle, but, that's something that we should look into. Thank you for the comments, and I appreciate, the sentiments, Mr. Canuti.
One last comment, Jeff. If you ask code enforcement to do that, you ought to have an inventory, the number of boxes and locations.
I can make a request.
If there's any
I don't know if I can have them do it. I can make a request.
Well, no, I'm saying make a request, and if there's any company identification.
I doubt you find it.
Okay. The only other thing, well, two more things. Everyone, please confirm your attendance. I wasn't sure if we didn't have a quorum tonight, so just please confirm attendance. Final thing is, as I get information on Marina, I'm going to keep presenting it to staff. I have seen email correspondence with CRA staff members and city staff in regards to coming in front of Planning and Zoning Board, whether it's a workshop or an official meeting, just to discuss the information as it welfare of that.
I think it's important that we have maybe a couple of workshops and invite the public and have it televised on Channel 18. So if you would be kind enough to ask Ms. Jones or whoever you have to ask.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
you know, interesting. I thought that once council actually decided to go to once a month with their meetings, we could kind of slide in on the back end and at least use that tech person, which they would have been using for that second meeting, but they actually set those meetings for workshops.
Right.
How about beforehand? I mean, before the council actually meets, it's kind of, you know, if we take up one or two items, at least we can probably get some airtime too. So that's just a
They also
suggestion.
schedule the utility district meetings prior to council meetings.
Prior to the workshop meetings on the third Wednesday?
I don't know about prior to workshop meetings.
Right. Maybe we can get us a little airtime to get some participation. But it's just a thought. I'm not asking you to act on it, but thank you very much, Mr. Gagnon.
Any other comments? Yeah.
Move to adjourn.
Second?
Very nice. That camera on.
Good job, everybody.
Huh? That camera
No,
on.
they're just using it. Just hold down there.
But right.
James, you look
No,
very
no, no,
rich.
no.